HealthQuest Radio. It's Dr. David Kolbaba on AM 560. The Answer.
Oh yeah, it's happening all along the beautiful shores of Lake Michigan. Meaningful, life-changing moments all around the world. HealthQuest Radio goes airborne, wheels up. Copy that. HealthQuest Radio proudly presents Adventures in Health with your host, Dr. David Kolbaba. Hi, I'm Alex, and you? Well, you're right where you're supposed to be. You're listening to America's #1 health news and science show. Our adventure guide, he is ready. He is the voice of integrative preventive health care in our nation today. He's a clinical director of our West Dundee offices. His story will show he is a man before his time, a real trailblazer. My friend, my partner, and my favorite radio boss. Here's our host, Dr. David Kolbaba. Hey, Dr. Dave.
How you doing, Alex?
How you doing?
Yeah. Thomas, how are you today as well?
Pretty good,
I think
Doctor.
we're all here and accounted for. And again, appreciate your tuning in to another edition of our HealthQuest radio broadcast on this today. Today. Just say today. Let's say on today. It's always good to self-correct. You know that expression, pure as the wind-driven snow? You know, think about what you not only think about, think about what you think about, but feel the feeling when you think that thought. You know, pure like the wind-driven snow. It's kind of like one of those thoughts or feelings you want to continue with life being as rough as it can be. But if we were to just move it maybe tweak it just a bit and say, like the wind-driven houses after a tornado or hurricane, what would you think? What would you feel about that? And of course, we can all jump into that real quick because life is full of these interesting Mother Nature and human-induced tragedies, or at least challenges, to be sure. You know, in the New Testament book of James, first chapter, it says this. It says, "Now, if any of you lack wisdom, he should ask of God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him." But then there's a condition. Here it is. And I quote, "But he must ask in faith, without any doubts. For the one who has doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. That man should not expect to receive anything from the Lord." I'd like to share that principle, not necessarily because it comes from the Bible, but for me, that's significant. It's the idea that being driven and tossed, or windswept, is about losing our footing and having sure-footedness, an anchor, a place to stay, a place to pivot from, is what stability comes from. At its most simplest concept. So the question is, how can we change our windswept status? Now you might think, well, I'm not windswept. I'm not driven and tossed by the wind. And I'd say, well, how are you at taking control, taking responsibility of your own health? And I'm not here to place blame today, but, you've heard of the military-industrial complex. But my question today is there such a thing as a medical-industrial complex? Powers that be mandating this or that for you and me. And we all know well in, recent months what it feels like to be driven back and forth by conflicting information, down one rabbit hole and into the next. Can drive a person crazy. Might make you feel windswept. Today we're going to bump up to some concepts that may help free you further from this windswept sense that you feel more often than any of us would like to. And it leads us into a thing that you've heard me talk about in past shows, about a more individualized personal self-care, a caring for ourselves, not a narcissism, but a true caring of the one life that God gave us. And concepts today we're going to discuss that you may not necessarily know, or people in the main, those same powers that be, may not want us to know because they would be liberating for us and we would benefit from them. Instead, perhaps those somewhere around us, entities, want us to continue drinking the Kool-Aid. But knowing some of the things we're going to cover today, I hope, can be liberating for sure. We're going to see how this information lands on you. And I think you're up for this. Let you be the judge, because today I'm just going to give you just a small taste that'll lead you to your first couple steps in this direction that we're calling today that personal self-care, rather than, as I mentioned, we don't need in this country necessarily a national health care program as much as all of us having been educated and motivated to take better care of the one life we have. But up till now, most of us as patients and custodians of our own bodies, most of us, we would think or say, I know nothing. Assuming at the same time that those we place our trust in healthcare today, well, they know everything. And then I ask the question, feel windswept? I just want you to consider that today, because one of the subjects that I'd like to talk about, and we'll get back to that, how to be separate in an effort to be whole. In other words, sometimes we need to separate ourselves from something that poses a threat. And that threat can come in many shapes, sizes, and forms. You know, we might say, I'm going to shut the TV off tonight so that I have time and energy to go for a walk. When I watch the TV, it replaces my walk. When I drink beer, it replaces water. So, like the wind-driven snow, I know what it's like. You'd rather just have life be, that the thoughts and the pictures in our mind about the wind-driven snow. Of course, people here don't like winter, but I do, especially a good winter where we do have snow. But we're going to enter the fray today on a subject that you might know very little about, and I'm sure you might tell yourself, I can throw the words around, but I don't know much about it. And as I said before, we're going to take some baby steps, some small steps, to confirm for you in your mind that you can get this stuff, that we don't have to worry about a hierarchy of people in the intelligentsia to tell us what we need necessarily, to necessarily tell us the bona fide, absolute, this is the way to go. Because too many of us have seen the dead ends enough to know that we question. And so I'd like to enter a door that pertains to a disease that is ravaging our country, and it has for some time. And later in the show, you're going to find that that has not always been true. So I'm going to start with a word that's going to be a little painful, but you're going to know something about it. I'm just going to help you clarify what you know to take you further today, take you deeper, so that we can mature in our knowledge about not only our body, but about the risks that are out there in the real world. I'd like to talk about, trans fats. What? Trans fats. I know those are bad because I've been hearing about them on the news. Okay, that's good. That's a good starting point. Trans fats are oils that are derived from vegetables. You see, they're generally in their natural state, they remain liquid, in nature. But we got the idea to do something with it and take these oils out of their liquid state and do something for the convenience of so many food producers out there. But these food producers happen to be one and the same with those who are involved with sending food our way that subjugates us to many diseases and health conditions we call sickness. In these trans fat oils, they are processed by a process called hydrogenation. Don't worry, I'm using these words right before we take our first break just to let it soak in during our commercial break. You see, hydrogenation is a process where these liquid oils are mixed with hydrogen, making them more solid rather than remaining in liquid form. Now, as I mentioned before, the motive and intention of this hydrogenated process is to lengthen the shelf life of a particular vegetable oil. We don't want rancid oils, and if you've been on the earth long enough, you know what a rancid oil tastes like and smells like, so we don't want that. So these food producers get the idea we can hydrogenate some of these vegetable oils and have them last longer, which, at the surface sounds like a really, really great idea. But something turns south and becomes very ugly and might relate very much to the disease that's killing more Americans than any other disease process. And we're going to talk about that and how to back ourselves out of that risk and maybe totally change the percentage of deaths and sickness brought on by cardiovascular disease by making some good choices. Stay right here.
You're listening to Chicagoland's longest-running health news and science show with your host, Dr. David Kolbaba.
When it comes to probiotics, let's separate the facts from fiction. Fact: only a handful of probiotic strains have ever been clinically shown to support human health. Fact: you're probably wasting your hard-earned money on that popular probiotic that just isn't up to par. Fact: the two most beneficial strains are the NCFM and the BI07 strains. And with over 200 research studies published, a special blend of these two probiotic strains are found in every bottle of our Restore and Renew, R&R for short. Clinical studies have shown the many established health benefits of taking R&R, which include vital support of our gastrointestinal tract and our immune system. R&R is backed by Metagenics ID guarantee for purity, clinical reliability, and predicted safety, making R&R your smart choice in probiotic supplementation. So get your bottle of R&R by calling our HealthQuest Radio Hotline, 800-794-1855, 800-794-1855. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Go to healthquestradio.com.
If you ask me, psychology causes people to have mental problems.
Can you imagine what people would say?
If we're always guided by other people's thoughts, what's the point of having our own?
So how do we get ourselves in trouble? Could there be a back door to this thing called cardiovascular disease? Why is cardiovascular disease, why is it not number 2 in the killing department? Why not number 5? Why not number 10? You might ask that question. Well, the story begins with these things called trans fats. Now, when they're in liquid form in nature, they're not near as dangerous. When we throw the hydrogen and create that process. The motive, the intention, as I said before, of this hydrogenated process is to lengthen the shelf life of these vegetable shortenings. And I know some of us who are a little older remember how popular margarine was as a replacement for butter, because there was an economical reason too, because some of these hydrogenated vegetable oils could be sold at more economical prices as well. But I got to say, there's an extraordinary number of processed food that we're eating today, well beyond margarine and shortening, that has these trans fats in them. The processed foods, especially the snack food realm, most commonly consumed in this country by people like you. And me sometimes. Maybe Windswept, I'm not sure. Interesting, or maybe not so interesting, I guess I could say frightening for sure, is that consumption of these trans fats cause hormonal levels of low-density lipoproteins. Now, you may not know what that is, but you know it in the form of bad cholesterol. So there's this good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol as measured in a typical blood chemistry. The clinical significance of the terrible manifestations of abnormal levels of these bad cholesterol molecules, and that is the terrible damage they do to our bodies, coupled with other dangerous risks that our body's response mechanism to the presence of these low-density lipoproteins. It's a first and second stage. We eat the trans fats, they produce a high amount of these low-density lipoproteins, these terrible, well, say the bad cholesterol, we'll use your vernacular, and then the body responds in kind. But its response, like when the firemen come to put your fire out, it's a good thing. If the firemen stay on the scene and keep drenching your house, we call it a flood. And that 1 and 2 stages of what happens, all because you're eating trans fats, is what happens. So together, the high levels of these low-density lipoproteins in your body, along with the body's response to the danger, i.e. the firemen, invariably leads to coronary heart disease in all of its forms. Things like the atherosclerotic plaquing you hear about, arterial sclerosis, heart attacks, strokes, and things like that. Now, the average person has heard throughout the years, people just like you and me, that coronary heart disease is a genetic predisposition with relatively less information or regard for what any of us could do to prevent this inevitable scenario of heart disease, especially due to the fact that coronary heart disease is the number 1 killer in the United States today, and it's heredity. That's what it is, and I'm screwed. And it has been the number 1 killer for a while now. Now, oddly enough, after something was altered in our daily diets, and you probably have not heard about this until now, heart disease came onto the scene. Now, I got to tell you that we have produced other shows on this topic with much more detail, so I'm going to continue with my discussion on these trans fats for your benefit today. But I would say that if you would want to get the radio show that's titled, the audio CD that's titled Cholesterol's Not the Culprit, that would be what you would want to do. You'd want to order that by calling our HealthQuest radio hotline at 800-794-1855. But the only point, based on what we've heard through the years, it would only make sense that the average person would assume that they're predisposed to heart disease, because it's the number 1 killer in the United States today, and it's a genetic inheritance, that's causing this predisposition. And that, of course, it's been reinforced in our minds throughout the years. But I tell you what, when you remember those calendars, you flip the little pages? Flip the pages back decade after decade. So we go from 2020 to 2010. Coronary heart disease, number 1 killer. 2010 to the year 2000. Coronary heart disease in the 1 and 2 position. Go to 1990s, then the 80s, continue throwing those calendar pages over, and you're going to come to a date in the history of man, in the history of this country, where coronary heart disease is not killing anybody. Or if it was unknown. And so for more information on that, get that Cholesterol's Not the Culprit audio CD. Now that doesn't sound too much like heredity to me. What about you? So some of the information that's been propagated, I say that a substantial portion of information that you've heard or that's been disseminated throughout the years regarding cardiovascular disease doesn't square with the accuracy one would expect from the Western medicine industrial complex, as I'm calling it. Even as it pertains to sharing with people like you and me, the general public, the truest cause of this country's heart disease problem. So I want to make some distinctions today. So stay with me so you can get a fuller understanding and come to your own conclusions. First of all, it's common knowledge that trans fats are bad fats, right? French fries. Yeah, cut the French fries down. I'll take out. I'll just go with the large instead of the extra large. Oh, really? French fries, for instance, is a prime example of food that's teeming with these trans fats. So perhaps even individuals like you may have decreased your consumption of these French fries to lower your exposure of these dangerous fats, right? Well, that's a good thing. Actually, there are two types of trans fats. I'm going to just stay with the dangerous ones today. But the one type of trans fats can actually be found in meat and in milk and things like that. And science has not even found that those fats are actually dangerous, and they're found naturally, apart from the human tampering. But a few years ago, in 2013, and you may have heard about it, I'm sure, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, determined that all partially hydrogenated oils would be considered certified to be less safe. That means GRAS, the acronym, generally recognized as safe. They pulled these partially hydrogenated oils, they pulled them out of that list, which means they certified these oils as being risky and dangerous to consume. And you say, well, okay, what's that all about? Well, we're going to get to that. But a question we might ask, what are food producers so attracted? Why are these producers so attracted to these terrible trans fats? Answer, convenient. It's easy to use, very cheap to produce. These hydrogenated oils have a very long shelf life. So guess what? We can get these things at a good deal, and then we can sell them and throw them in our foods. Even the restaurateurs are using them because these trans fats offer for most, now get this, a more desirable texture and taste to what might be considered to be, in my estimation, less than perfect quality food, aka otherwise known as cheap, convenient food and snacks. With these trans fats, you can gin up the taste experience of lower quality food. So if you're serving lower quality food, you might want to put some trans fats in there because it'll make your garbage food not taste so garbagey. Making bad food tasting like as if it were a good food. Go figure. But a matter of fact, the same thing holds true. Think about this. Imagine how lousy garbage food would taste if it were not for these trans fats, as well as other food processing enhancements, not unlike the perfume that McDonald's puts in its French fries to increase your enjoyment factor. Now, the question is, some of these additives that are thrown in our food could be creating the craving, a taste for, perhaps a dependency on your part to need to want to buy it again. Remember, did you ever say, I got a craving for right now? I got a craving for that. And then you list what, I got a craving for a Whopper. I got a craving for a Taco Bell. All right, we're going to show you how you can make the choices and change the destiny. All this and more. Stay right here. It's a HealthQuest Saturday morning.
It's Dr. David Kolbaba. It's HealthQuest Radio.
This is Dr. David Kolbaba. You can improve your health and keep it that way through progressive testing. The typical black box approach in this country of ours is nothing more than letting you crash your body into some sickness or disease, and you're left searching the wreckage for that black box. And then after the fact, you're treated with risky drugs, surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, leaving you more compromised by the treatment. With progressive testing, we can uncover an existing problem or weakness in your body even before you experience any sign or symptom. And then we'll take a more natural approach, specifically targeting the compromised organ or system, restoring your health once and for all. Over time, then we'll retest your body to verify your strategy is working. Call our HealthQuest Radio Hotline and tell us about a specific health concern, and we'll let you know what specific progressive assessment is best for a healthier you. Call 1-800-794-1855. Remember, your road to better health doesn't have to be predicated on sickness or disease. 1-800-794-1855.
Health conditions and inflammation go hand in hand with one another. It's inflammation that helps protect our body from those invading infections, and it can help heal injuries too. Inflammation surges into the mix, then does its job, and then gets the heck out of there. Once inflammation has done its job, the human body uses fatty acids found in both omega-3 and omega-6s to reduce the inflammation. Hi, this is Dr. David Kolbaba. It's so important that these fatty acids be consumed in a healthy ratio because uncontrolled inflammation, like a runaway train, can lead to chronic inflammation, even cancer. Healthy food eaters can be out of sync with their fatty acid ratio until Oprima from Standard Process. You see, the body needs to maintain higher ratios of these omega-3 to 6s to facilitate the resolution phase of the inflammation process. Oprima does the work for you. Oprima is available just by calling our HealthQuest Radio Hotline at 800-794-1855. That's 800-794-1855.
Go to healthquestradio.com.
You know, you can always email me at drdavid, Dr. David, drdavid at healthquestradio.com. And again, our HealthQuest Radio hotline number is 800-794-1855. That's 800-794-1855. I want to mention today, one of the reasons why I decided to at least begin the topic of fats, fatty acids, and to begin with the subject of trans fats is because so many of us are ravaged by the heart disease that could have a back door to it, as I am asserting to today. And we have a test, an index, a fatty acid index test, where we can actually see how much of these trans fats are building up in you. And for those of us who've been trying to get healthy and get rid of these trans fats, those that embed themselves in the tissues of our body, how well your therapy, how well your strategy is working. And so we have this test, the fatty acid index test. Now, I've had that test done, so I have seen the results of what my healthy living has done for me. Now, it doesn't mean that your first test is going to be a total tragedy, but I'm sure it may be worse than you think. If heart disease is the number one killer in the United States today, then I'm going to say that the activity and the presence of these trans fats in your body will be witnessed and manifested in a test like this. So I thought, you know what we could do? We could offer, and this is no big special offer, we decided to do a mini clinical trial. And instead of waiting for us to do the big show on fats and fatty acids in the coming months, we're going to take some of our HealthQuest listeners' present patients, and we're going to throw them into a mini clinical trial. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to do your test, which we're calling the Fatty Acid Index Test Mini Clinical Trial. We're going to do that Fatty Acid Index test on you, but then we're going to give you some things to do over the next 60 to 90 days. And then we get to retest you, and we're going to use that information to share with our other listeners. Now, we started the show today mentioning something about being windswept, driven and tossed by the wind. And again, I'll reiterate, all of us know what it's been like in the last few months, being told what to do and only to find that it wasn't true or accurate. And so it's a time for us to grab the helm, grab the wheel, and do something more about our personal self-care. And so this might be one way you could introduce yourself in these first steps by seeing whatever the presence of these trans fats in your body would be. It'd be good to test, but also to see if you can go the 90 days and see a reversal in it using nutritional sound means to do that, lifestyle changes and alterations. So I want you to call for more information. Maybe you can be part of our study, 800-794-1855. That's 800-794-1855. There will be no limit to those who want to participate. I decided I'm not going to keep a limit on that. So whoever is interested is fine. But if you don't make that call today, if you don't connect with us, that door is going to close. And what's going to happen when you hear the show in a few months and watch all and hear all of the testimonies on people improving, their state of health and reducing the risk of coronary heart disease and stroke and all of those terrible procedures that your friends are having, the angioplasty, the artificial heart valve surgeries, the atherectomies, the bypass surgeries, the catheterization that happens, even heart transplant. And who in this day and age hasn't had a heart stent? And I would like for you to do something, preemptively, so that you don't have to go there. Wouldn't it be neat to end your life on the planet at a ripe old age, never having a heart attack? So call that number, 800-794-1855, 800-794-1855. Get more information and jump on the list, okay, for be a part of our fatty acid index, our mini fatty acid index mini clinical trial. I think that's what I would do if I were you. If I was hearing what you're hearing now, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. Interesting at the same time, when we talked about food cravings, have you ever gotten the sense that you're craving a specific food item, when you say, boy, I could do with it whatever? Ever get a sense that craving was brought on by something beyond just a simple craving? Maybe you suspect a food additive is causing that crave. I have that same suspicion, and science is now bearing that out. So obviously eat cleaner foods without having to have the manipulation of the chemicals that are found. But as you can understand, the temptation is great when it comes to including these trans fats and many questionable fast food choices from the perspectives of those who sell these foods to you, the unknowing public. It sure makes a person think twice, about reconsidering not only eating those foods, but reconsider why they would do that. Countries like Switzerland, Denmark, Canada, even some areas of this country are further restricting the use of these trans fats in later days. So the question you might want to ask, what's wrong with using these trans fats that improve the taste and texture of all the convenient foods that I eat? What's wrong? What's wrong with that? Well, a little bit ago, I mentioned how these trans fats can cause excessive increase in our low-density lipoproteins. I'll break that out a little bit for you, just a little bit.
It's Dr. David Kolbaba. It's HealthQuest Radio.
You are ready to be taught the new way.
Hi, this is Dr. David Kolbaba. Glad you're here with us today. HealthQuest Radio is Chicagoland's longest-running health news and science program. I've been an integrated healthcare practitioner for over 33 years now, and if you've been wondering what it's like to be a patient in our HealthQuest offices, well, take a look at our website. Go to healthquestradio.com under Testimonials and Tales of Wonder, right on the homepage, where you'll find many encouraging stories of success straight from our patient's mouth. Would you like to be done with those migraine headaches? Get your insulin under control, feel more energetic, maybe having better sex, get that libido in gear again, discover why you eat for every emotion, and then get it under control. On medication and want to be off of it, whatever health challenges you the most, you can schedule your new patient consult with me just by calling our HealthQuest Radio hotline at 800-794-1855. That's 800-794-1855. We'll be back with more HealthQuest right after this.
All of our radio show podcasts are available in the iTunes Store. Look under Adventures in Health. Download us on your iPod and take us with you.
Can you imagine what people would say?
If we're always guided by other people's thoughts, what's the point of having our own?
It does make you think, doesn't it? I mentioned that countries like Switzerland, Canada, Denmark, and some areas in this country now are starting to restrict the use of these trans fats. In a few months, we're going to be doing a whole series on fats so you can really get this down. So today is our test flight to see if you can retain some of what you're learning today about these things called trans fats. Now, I asked before the break, people might say, well, why not use the trans fats? I mean, it makes the bad food taste good, stuff like that. Well, a little bit ago, I mentioned how these trans fats cause excessive increase in our low-density lipoproteins, the bad cholesterol. Those are the ones that are related or correlated to heart disease. the number one killer. These trans fats do something even more critical for you to defend yourself against heart disease, and that is that these trans fats actually lower the levels of what is known in your mind and in your vocabulary as the good cholesterol, the HDL, the high-density lipoproteins. So in the presence of these trans fats, high-density lipoproteins, or these HDL levels, the good cholesterol, they suffer. So that not only do you bring on the risk of heart disease, you also take off the flotation device so that your body cannot arm itself against such things as heart disease. Now, you mentioned, well, what is a high-density lipoprotein? Well, it's a cholesterol that is known to be, as I said, the good cholesterol because it helps remove other forms, the not-so-good forms of cholesterol. And the reason why we say it's high density, because the high-density lipoprotein isn't made up of that much cholesterol. There's a little center that's very hardened with cholesterol, and the rest is a proteolytic enzyme. And that enzyme is like a Pac-Man, and it eats up other not-so-good cholesterol, which is really neat because when it's active, it lowers the risk of heart disease. In other words, the high-density lipoprotein being more dense, because it's got that lipoprotein ring, it goes around eating up the bad stuff. It scavenges and it removes the low-density lipoproteins, and that's where you have the war, and that's where you have the inflammation. And we say here that heart disease is inflammatory. By the way, so is Alzheimer's, so is diabetes. You see, HDL, high-density lipoprotein, the good cholesterol, acts as a maintenance crew for the inner walls of your blood vessels. If you don't have higher levels of HDL, the good cholesterol, you get plaquing, arteriosclerosis. You break off a clot, you end up with a stroke. And if there is such a thing as the medical industrial complex, there are entities out there that are making money. They make money on the sickness. And did you know that trans fat eating people, aka the average American, are more susceptible to diabetes? A large study, over 80,000 trans fat eating women found a 40% higher risk of experiencing diabetes than if they weren't eating the trans fats. And in another large-scale study called the Nurses' Health Study, found that women who consumed certain levels of these trans fats prior to menopause seem to be more susceptible to breast cancer after menopause. In other words, what we do today might adversely affect us tomorrow. And then you ask, is diabetes on the rise in this country today? And the answer is absolutely yes. Remember, to eat or not to eat these trans fats. This is no longer the question. So I want you to become one of our members of the Fat Acid Index test we're doing, the mini clinical trial we told you about. And by the way, I want to mention too that everybody that gets into that trial will get a free audio CD titled Cholesterol's Not the Culprit, just by being part of that study, that Fatty Index mini clinical trial. Now you wonder, where do these trans fats live anywhere? Where do they live? When you call that number 800-794-1855. Fried foods, to be sure. Did you know that donuts are full of trans fats? Your favorite frozen pizza. And as I mentioned before, margarine, soft creamy spreads, even various baked goods, even cakes, pies. You wouldn't think pie, blueberry pies, got it? Yes. Even popular coffee creamers have these trans fats in it. And just because there are restrictions on trans fats in this country, to be sure, common processed foods can contain even small amounts of them and get away with it, posing a risk. As these nominal amounts, these small amounts accumulate in you with each other, taking up space that a healthy fatty acid, you say, I gotta get rid of the trans fats, start to eat the good ones. Can't eat the bad ones, gotta eat the good ones. Did you know that when trans fats are occupying your body, you'll be less able to take on the benefits of a good oil when you take the healthier oils like the omega-3s and the omega-6s, which we're not talking about today, trying to keep it simple on the trans fats. So, what I'm asking you to do, if you're interested, 800-794-1855, get in the trial with us. And let us see if we use nutrition and lifestyle habit change to see in 90 days if we could reduce the presence of those trans fats in your body. I know when we test you, I know what's going to happen. We're going to find that they're there, and we'll be able to quantify how much of them are there. But in 90 days, we're going to do the same and find that they're less. And I got to tell you, my score was really good. So it proved to me, it justified and validated that for me, what I'm doing for my life, for David, is working. And I want that to happen for you, but you got to make that call. 800-794-1855. You get a copy of The Cholesterol's Not the Culprit when you make that a reservation now, but you got to make that call. 800-794-1855. Stay right here. Hi, this is Dr. David Kolbaba. Glad you're here with us today. HealthQuest Radio is Chicagoland's longest-running health news and science program. I've been an integrated healthcare practitioner for over 33 years now, and if you've been wondering what it's like to be a patient in our HealthQuest offices, well, take a look at our website. Go to healthquestradio.com under Testimonials and Tales of Wonder, right on the homepage, where you'll find many encouraging stories of success straight from our patient's mouth. Would you like to be done with those migraine headaches? Get your insulin under control, feel more energetic, maybe having better sex, get that libido in gear again, discover why you eat for every emotion, and then get it under control. On medication and want to be off of it, whatever health challenges you the most, you can schedule your new patient consult with me just by calling our HealthQuest Radio hotline at 800-794-1855. That's 800 794-1855. We'll be back with more HealthQuest right after this.
Go to healthquestradio.com.
All right, so you say to yourself, I'm going to read labels. I'm going to read labels. I'm going to read food labels. But did you know beyond looking for the trans fats, you got to be careful when reading labels because they may be hidden and listed as partially hydrogenated oils. And the partially hydrogenated oils can be relabeled as vegetable protein. And on you go, with you being driven and tossed, not like the wind-driven snow, but like the terrible hurricanes with their fury and damage to you, ravaging you. And then you end up in the statistic, just like I could, falling to the number one killing disease in this country. You could go to vegetable oils, err on the side of olive oil, sunflower, or canola oil to be sure. But over time, the FDA has become even more vigilant with imposing ever-increasing restrictions on these trans fats in processed food. Recently, I'm talking 2018, they tightened their restrictions on various processed food producers. The big but? Just because the label says trans fat free does not make it so. You have to get that. I don't want to jig-jag with you, but I got to tell you, not necessarily what's on the label is the truth. It does not mean there are no trans fats in that food item. To keep it simple, we Americans are excessive. We are excessive overeaters. It's obvious that the less food we eat, given our present obesity dilemma, the less exposure we'll experience with these trans fats. And that's a good thing. Pretty simple. The impact of trans fats on our blood vessels leads to heart disease. And did you know the same trans fats that are directly associated with coronary heart disease, there is also a very strong connection and correlation to that of cancer, because these trans fats damage the inner lining of our blood vessels. Now the question is, what is your status? Now I know what mine is because I'm looking at mine on the computer right here. You'll get your results like a speedometer. It'll be like a strip. You can see it, Tomas, or you see the arrow, and you say, this is you. And we can see what the desirable realm is for you in trans fats. And by the way, this fatty acid index mini clinical trial that we are doing, that I hope you'll be participating with, so that we can be on the other side of this 90 days from now and see that it worked for you when we do the radio shows on it. And you're going to say, well, what drug did it take to have you do that? You say, I didn't take a drug. Well, and then people will remain speechless, but they'll have the advantage of the presence of less trans fats in the body. So when you eat the good oils and the good fatty acids, your body will be able to consume those and then create a defense against diseases like coronary heart disease. And there are other tests that are part of this whole clinical trial we're doing, where we test you for the omega-3, the 6s, the ratio, all of that. And you're going to learn as you go. Just like we're going to in this show as we have come through the, 37, 38 years we've been on the air. So I would just engage the process. Call that number, 800-794-1855. You'll get that audio CD, Cholesterol's Not the Culprit, which will explain in a deeper, meaningful way how you can anchor yourself to some of these concepts that say, I'm not necessarily relegated to the number one killing disease in the country, and I've got very little statistic to show of its inheritance, because in 1923, heart disease was statistically non-evident in this country. That ain't heredity, everybody. This offer is only for today. So you've got to call that number. Only today. We're not going to hold... the bus is leaving the station after today. 800-794-1855. 800-794-1855. I would love to have you be a part of our Fatty Acid Index mini clinical trial. Okay, I did it. You do it. Get the same result. Only you're going to hear people on the air in a few months, just like you, who did something. Hope you're one of them listening in on your radio debut. 800. That would be neat. 794-1855. Line's busy. Keep going. 800-794-1855. We'll see you next week.
See you guys next week.
Be blessed.